welcome to Conversations in the Den. My co-host Jennifer is on in my left, and our guest for today is name is Kayleen, and Kayleen is going to discuss with us her physical health journey.
hmm
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, by the way.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I'm excited.
yeah.
So I'm like, do you want me to just kind of jump in or?
You have quite an extraordinary
Absolutely.
story,
Please
and
let us
I
know
am
your
just
story
dying
then.
to hear it all.
Yeah. So, like, I've had lots of really random health things throughout my life. Like, in high school, I would get bronchitis every winter. Um, and then even after high school, the first couple of years that I was in college, I would get bronchitis in the winter. And then in 2009, I ended up having Epstein-Barr, which is kind of like mono. And
Wow.
so I was sick for a really long time with that.
Okay.
And in 2012, I had this like really random pain in my side one morning, and I passed out in the bathroom and landed
Wow.
on my head
Wow.
on the tile and ended up in the ER, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And
Wow.
then in 2014, I had to have my gallbladder removed 2 months after having my first baby.
Okay.
Wow.
And
So like,
what is your doctor when you're discussing these issues with your doctor? What's your doctor saying?
well, I didn't actually have a like primary care doctor or anything because I just went to the ER, and they didn't really talk about the pain in my side of why it that like made me pass out. But then I found out later it was a gallbladder attack.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up, had me have my gallbladder removed a couple years later. And then
Okay, so I'm hoping at this point you do have a primary care doctor.
yes, I do. I will get to that for sure. So and then in 2000, I think it was 2015, I'm pretty sure it was, I had a cyst on my ovary pop and ended
Oh
up
Lord.
going through like, because I thought I had appendicitis. I was in so much pain, and then I found out that I just had a cyst pop. But then the worst thing happened in 2016. Um, I ended up with strep throat. I woke up sick on my son's second birthday, February 14th. He's a Valentine's baby. I woke up on February 14th
Oh,
with
happy
like
February 15th.
nice. I woke up with like super, super sore throat, fever, like feeling really awful. Went to urgent care the next day and found out I had strep. Took antibiotics, and I got a little bit better for a few days and then started getting worse again. I was like, well, that's weird, but whatever. And I just kind of dealt with it. And then it was February 29th. I remember because it was a leap year. So it was February
Yeah.
29th. I had this whole date planned with my husband.
Yeah.
And while we were on the date, like I was having so much chest pain and difficulty breathing that we had to end the date short. And I went to the urgent care, but as soon as I said chest pain, they're like, we won't treat you. You have to go to ER. So I went to the emergency room. They did, all sorts of tests, gave me some pain meds because like I was in so much pain. Like I so much pain, and I couldn't lay down because it would make it hurt worse. And they did a chest x-ray,
Mm-hmm.
and then they came in and they're like, well, the x-ray shows that you either have a blood clot in your lung or maybe like the beginnings of
Okay.
pneumonia. And so they did a CT scan, but that didn't show anything. And so they're like, well, we're going to send you home and just kind of assume that this is the early stages of pneumonia. So I'm going to write you a prescription for antibiotics. You can take it if you want. If you wake up with a cough in the morning, I'd suggest doing the antibiotics. I was like, well, that's
Okay.
like,
Now, can I just say one thing?
yeah.
Um, here again, Jen. We've had this conversation before about how these doctors love to just send people home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when they send you home and something happens to you, now you got to call. You have to come by ambulance, and now they'll look at you.
hmm
And it's terrible that they do that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Oh,
there,
yeah.
you're telling them you're in pain. why not just do any test that they can to figure out what's going on?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And oh, it gets so much better.
Do tell. Do tell.
So I ended up filling the prescription for antibiotics because I woke up with a cough.
Yeah.
And so I filled the prescription, again, felt a little bit better for like a couple days and then went right back downhill.
Wow.
And this happened. So I first got the strep throat on February 14th, and then I was at the ER February 29th. A couple weeks
Mm-hmm.
later, I went back to urgent care because I had started coughing up blood. Like I was
No.
coughing so
Oh,
much that I was like it was making me throw up because I would cough so much and I was in so much pain. I couldn't sleep in my bed. I had to sleep in a recliner because if I laid down, it made my chest hurt so bad and made it really hard to breathe. So I went to urgent care and they ran a few tests, but didn't do like another x-ray or anything. Like they just ran a couple tests, tried a couple things. And he's like, I think it's just the pneumonia. So
Wow.
I'm going to have you do another round of antibiotics.
No.
And then he said, but don't fill them till next week. Give it a week. And if you're still not feeling better, then fill the antibiotics and come
But
back.
even though you were coughing up blood.
Yeah.
Oh
And
God.
so
my
I
gosh.
I went home. I was like, well, okay. And then I started coughing up more blood. And so I went back to urgent care the next week. And the doctor did a chest x-ray and he was like, go ahead and fill the prescription of antibiotics. Take them. Your
Okay, can
best
I
bet
make a
at
suggestion to all of our viewers? Can I just suggest that if there is blood involved, that is an
ER.
emergency.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No urgent
definitely.
care, no personal family physician. That is emergency.
Yes.
And Kayleen, at this
911.
What?
Kayleen, at this juncture, now that you've gone, this is your third visit to the
To the
ER.
urgent care. Yeah, well, that was urgent care for that one.
But this is the second time you're coughing up blood and you're in the urgent care. Now, at this point in time, looking back, what would you say to someone that's listening to this? What would you have done differently?
So this is where it's tricky because honestly, I would have said go to ER. Like just go to the ER. Where it's really tricky is I'm going to be just super honest. Like we're very poor and we had really bad
Yeah, of
health
course.
insurance. And so going to the ER, which I'd already gone to,
Yeah.
it's thousands of dollars to go to the ER. And so I
Understand.
was like, I can't, I was like, and like, I can't do the ER
For that.
again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like that's the tricky part because honestly, I really wish I would have gone to the ER because they probably would have figured out what was actually wrong
Yeah.
before I ended up as
Okay,
bad as
so
I
sorry, did
did.
you say that you're not a Canadian citizen?
I'm in the US. I'm in Utah.
Yeah.
Oh God. Oh Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is my other suggestion. If you're traveling, whether you're in North America or anywhere, please buy travel insurance.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Because then,
For those
because
traveling.
then all these thousands of dollars that you're paying just to get looked at are covered.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. For those that are traveling, but you actually live in Utah,
Yeah.
right?
So, yeah,
Oh,
this was all happening like right here where I live.
yeah. Okay.
Um and yeah, so he like this guy did a chest x-ray. So the second time I've been in the urgent care, he did a chest x-ray. He said it looks a little bit worse than what they did at the ER. So the pneumonia has probably gotten worse. Take the antibiotics. Your options are if it doesn't work, go to ER, get a lung specialist. Like those are your options. So I was like, well, I guess I'll fill the prescription. So I filled the prescription, nothing happened. And I started calling around a lung specialist. So I was like, okay, a lung specialist seems like the best thing. And no lung specialist would see me for at least 2 weeks, for at least 2 months,
Oh
because
Wow.
wow.
I would be a new uh sorry, I'm
Patient.
having like yeah, patient. I'm having very real like COVID brain
Yeah.
fog. Anyway, and so I was like, I can't wait 2 months. Like I knew I couldn't wait 2 months. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna just try a primary care physician. So I called around and finally found one that would take me sooner than 2 weeks because again, new patient. I finally
Thank
found one. Yeah, thank heavens. Like the woman that I was talking to when I was telling her my stuff, she's like, let's get you in. And so she got me in like 4 days later. which was fantastic. I was like, I can hold on. I can do 4 days. Like I can wait 4 days to go in. And
Yeah.
he was amazing. Like we now, like I go to him now. My husband goes to him now. He spent 3 hours with me at
Wow.
our appointment. And I will never forget, as he's asking me questions and I'm responding, he kept saying, interesting. That's interesting. And then he's like, you don't want to be interesting to a doctor. I was like, cool. they they ran a bunch of tests. They even did a TB test. They took blood so they could do testing that way. And then I asked for painkillers. I was like, I'm in so much pain. So he even prescribed me some Percocet for the pain, and then sent me on my, we made a plan. He's like, "Okay, I want you to get another CT scan." So we had it planned for me to get a CT scan on that Thursday, because I went in on Tuesday. So I was 2 days later, I was going to get a CT scan, and then I was going to come back the following Monday to go over things. So like we made a plan for what to do to figure out what was going on. Sent me home, and the next morning I felt even worse. I took Percocet and it did nothing for my pain. I started coughing up more blood, and I just felt awful. Like at this point, I can hardly even get up to go to the bathroom on my own because I'm
And so,
so
Kayleen, at
exhausted.
this point in time, we're looking at what, 6 weeks later? From the first time you felt that
Two
pain in
months.
this, 2
2 months.
months. Good Lord.
Yeah, this is
Gee,
about 2 months later, almost to the day.
wow.
And so I wake up that morning after seeing the primary care physician, just feeling terrible. And I wanted to go to the ER, but I was just like, oh, like I just, the money aspect was really weighing on
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
had my husband call the doctor, because like I was in so much pain and it was so difficult to breathe that I could hardly even talk. So I had my husband call the doctor's office and explain what was going on. They're like, just go to the ER, just go. And I was like, okay, if I have a doctor telling me to go to the ER, I'm going to go to the ER. So I went, and after, all of these tests and all this stuff, I'll skip all of that and get to one part. They found out I was septic. I had septicemia.
Good
So
Lord.
I had such a bad infection in my lung that it had turned into sepsis. So it was sepsis. I had sepsis.
So,
Yeah.
which means that your organs were being affected by the
Yes,
bacteria that was collecting in your body.
exactly. So like I quite literally got there at just the right time, basically. And so after all these tests, the lung specialist comes in. Really quick way to get a lung specialist is to have something wrong with your lungs and go to the ER. So the
Yeah.
lung specialist finally comes in after looking at all of these, they did x-ray, CT scan, all of the fun stuff. He comes in and he's like, why is she not on oxygen? Get her on oxygen, and she needs to be in the ICU now.
Wow.
And they even had the charge nurse up in the ICU come down to make it a
Okay.
faster transition up there. And
Wow.
it was a whirlwind after that. Shortly after I got up there, they made my husband leave the room so that they could do a thoracentesis. So they put like this long needle through my back into my lung to try to take out as much liquid and stuff as they could,
Oh my
but
goodness.
fluid. But it was so thick, like it was so advanced at that point that he couldn't even get a whole lot out because it was like
Oh, so this was
gelatinized.
mucus, not blood.
Like mucus and stuff like that. And
Okay.
then come to find out, I had empyemas, which is like infected pus pockets, basically.
In
I had
your
them in my lung, in my left lung, in the pleural space. So
Oh,
there's an empty space in your lung where your lung has room to expand.
yes.
It had gotten in there,
Good
which is
Lord.
why the antibiotics weren't helping, because there's not really a whole lot of blood flow there.
Ah,
And so I ended up having to have surgery. They wanted to get me in that day, but they were totally booked up. So I went in the next day and I had surgery. They wanted to do it laparoscopically because that's a lot less
Yeah,
invasive.
they didn't want it to be invasive.
Exactly. They didn't want to be super invasive, but so they tried and they're like, it's too bad. And so they had to open me up all the way. So it's about 5 inches now, but it was bigger when I first had it.
Hmm.
I have a big scar on my back from having a thoracotomy where they cut all the way through and had to like spread my ribs to get to my lung to take everything out and clean it and all of that.
Wow.
Wow.
And then I had chest tubes for days after that to drain everything. And so I was in the ICU for a few days after that.
Okay, so
Um,
that sounds like you had pneumonia.
yes, that's what it was. It was pneumonia, and then it turned into the empyema. And one of the things that I found out after the fact is it's not a common thing to happen for like healthy younger people, because I was 26 when this happened.
Yeah.
And so it didn't make like they wouldn't have thought about it really, because that's just not something that happens that often for younger people. It's usually older people or young children that it happens to. So it was just super random and weird, but it took a while to recover from that, obviously. Like that would, it just was a long and pretty brutal recovery. And since
So
then,
no, you had one child at that point in time. You had one small child at that point in
yes,
time.
I had one kid at that point. He was
Yeah.
2. And we have some absolutely amazing friends who live very close, like 10-15 minute drive away.
Thank God.
And
Yeah.
they basically like took him almost the whole time. Like my
Oh,
husband would take him at nights and whatnot usually, but they basically totally took over taking care of him while I was in the hospital for that week,
oh, wonderful,
which was
wonderful.
amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was very good. I was very grateful to have amazing support. And
Yeah.
then I had to have a PIC line placed. So, because I needed intravenous antibiotics, so I had a PIC line placed in my arm, and I had that for a couple weeks. But the overall like healing process from that took months.
I bet. I bet. Now,
Yeah.
do you feel like that your lungs have recovered from all of that trauma? Do you feel like your
So
body has recovered from the surgery?
so overall, mostly, because they had to cut through all of the muscle and everything right there, I have issues with like just back pain like pretty frequently in that
And that was
area.
5 years ago.
That was 4 years ago.
No, four
Yeah.
years ago.
It'll be
Yeah.
5 years in April. This next April, it'll be 5 years. But I think it, and I'm like my doctor that I went back to has mentioned that it just weakened that lung. So going to the where we are now, I get respiratory illnesses easier and
Mm.
usually
Oh my
worse
goodness.
than most people
How
do.
are you now dealing with what's happening in the world today?
So that's where I'm at now. I'll try to make this relatively short. So with COVID, we've been very careful. We only go out for grocery shopping. We don't get together with friends or family. We mask up we have been following all guidelines, trying to be very careful.
Yes.
My son, my 6-year-old son, is the only one who goes out of home for anything because my husband's been working from home. Um, so my son is the only one who goes out. He goes to school twice a week. And I think he must have somehow got sick from school. So he came down sick last month, just with like a little cough, a little bit of congestion for a couple days, but like nothing to even make him like take an extra nap. Like he was seriously totally
Mm.
fine. And then it kind of went
Okay.
through like my husband and my daughter got sick about the same time after my first son, and they were sick for about 3 days, mostly just tired, a little bit of congestion, but no big deal. And then my youngest son, my at the time 18-month-old, but now he's 19 months, um, got the cough and a little bit of congestion for a few days, and he still has a lingering cough. It's been almost a month that he's had the lingering cough at this point, but it really like not a huge deal. But then on December 7th, I got like that sore throat, that tickle in the back of your throat. And I was like, oh man, now I got it. And then I woke up on the 8th, like definitely sick, very sore throat, cough, headache, body ache, just everything, the whole gamut. And then it kind of like
So
moved into my,
basically, flu symptoms.
Yeah, basically, but I was like, you know what? It doesn't surprise me that I got it worse than they did because I get all respiratory illnesses worse. Like I didn't think a whole lot of it. Started having chest pain, shortness of breath, but again, all of this is relatively normal for a bad respiratory illness for me. Like
Yeah.
because of what I've experienced, like none of it seemed super out of the ordinary. But then I was still sick after more than 10 days. I was like, "Okay, like I really need to get checked out because this is getting really ridiculous." Like the
Yeah.
shortness of breath and the chest pain was getting really bad. And I was like, "Well, I'm having all COVID symptoms, so I know that my doctor will want me to get tested."
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I was like, "Okay, well, I'll go get tested." So I got tested on December 19th. And I was expecting to take that negative result to my doctor and say, "Okay, it's not COVID. Let's figure out what's going on because I don't feel well."
Yeah.
And then I got a call that following Tuesday saying that I was positive for COVID.
Good
And I was
Lord.
shocked. I was like, "What? Like, what? We've been so careful. We've done everything that we're supposed to do."
Yeah.
But the
But
thing,
I,
yeah, but you have to remember though, Kayleen, it's airborne.
yeah.
So unless you're not
And
breathing, you know,
mhm.
unless you're
I know.
not breathing,
And like,
you have a chance of getting it.
yeah. And that's the really hard part about it, I think, is like you can be as careful as possible and still somehow get it. And I
But
think that's why it's so important for everyone to be very, very careful with it.
Kelly,
Not just a few. Yeah, go ahead.
did your husband and kids have it? Did they have a milder version?
We think that that must be what happened because like nothing else really makes sense,
Yeah.
especially because and now I like because I've been sick now since the 7th and
Yeah.
they haven't had any new symptoms. Like they haven't
Yeah.
and we live
So
in a small 2-bedroom apartment. So like it's not like they're not exposed. Anyway, go ahead.
so
Okay,
so
yeah,
is the general assumption that they had a milder version, that the boys and your son, your husband had a milder version, and because you have a compromised immune and a lung capacity,
Yeah.
you have actually been hit really hard. So
Mhm.
tell us about COVID, because it's so good to talk to somebody that actually has it. So tell us about what
I
you're
mean,
dealing with.
not that we were looking for somebody that had
Oh,
it,
no,
but
I know.
you
No,
know,
I know. It's been really like because I had like all of the hallmark signs of it, like every single hallmark sign of COVID, but I really didn't. I was like, we've been so careful. And again, this is relatively normal for me. If I have forgetting a respiratory illness, like I thought maybe it had turned into bronchitis or a sinus infection because I've had that happen simultaneously. And
Yeah.
so I had the shortness of breath, and that was probably the scariest thing. That was the thing that like really pushed me to want to get tested was I was like,
okay.
this
Now,
is
when you
really
say shortness
ridiculous.
of breath,
Hmm?
what do you mean? I mean,
So like
we already hear the term shortness of breath, but
so
I mean, like, what do you mean? Like, you were like struggling to breathe?
so for me, how it was at first when it kind of like settled into my chest was it was more like I was having some chest pain and I was kind of feeling like I'd exercised really hard, but I didn't do anything. I was just like getting down and changed my son's diaper. And then by the time I put it in the trash and washed my hands, I was like, holy crap, I'm really winded. So, like those kinds of things. But then I kind of started feeling a little bit better. So, like the day before Christmas Eve and Christmas, I was feeling okay. Like I still had a little bit of chest pain and I've been having like daily headaches. So I was still having some of those things, but I thought I was getting a little bit better. And I apologize. This is the longest I've talked since I've been sick and I'm like
No,
starting to get a
no
little
problem.
breathless. But the day after
Take your
Chris
time.
yeah.
Take your time. And if you need to stop talking, you just tell us, okay? Because
Okay.
this is show, we want you to be well. So if you feel like you need
Yeah.
to stop talking, then we'll take over, and we'll chat while you listen, and then you can come back in. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay now. The day after Christmas, I like
Okay.
plummeted, it surprised me because I was like, I thought I was getting a little bit better, and then I just plummeted. Like the
And
shortness of
you were
breath.
diagnosed on the 19th of December?
Yeah,
Seven.
like
COVID?
yeah, that's when I was tested. So I've been sick since the 7th and tested positive on the 19th. And then I
No.
found out on the 22nd that I was positive. And I was like, wow, I figured I had been over the worst of it at that point. Like I was already out of the quarantine window because I was already past like 10 plus days from onset of symptoms. And so like I was like, oh, that's great. Like I must be past the worst of it. So I was like, cool, like I should start feeling better. And so when I felt better for a few days, I was like, oh yes, like
You
I'm
know what?
over the worst of it.
Yeah. And you no, Kayleen, I know that you're we don't want to keep you too long on the show, only because we're concerned about your health and all of that. But
Thank you.
and we're also a little bit it's pretty soon we're going to be out of time. But I wanted to ask about today. I know you write a blog, um, and you is it a video blog that you do?
So it's actually just a podcast. So
It's a
I have a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now your podcast, if you could just whiz me through, tell us quickly, what is the podcast about?
So it's called Scars We Share.
All righty.
And I have different guests on every episode. And
Yeah.
I ask the same 3 questions to every guest.
Yeah.
What physical scar do you have? And they tell me a story about a physical scar.
Yeah.
And then what internal scar are you willing to talk about? And
Yeah.
they tell me about an internal scar. It gets pretty deep sometimes.
Yeah, I bet. I
And
bet.
yes, and then how have you overcome it all? Or how are you like dealing with it, overcoming it if they're
Yeah.
in
So
the
now,
process?
what we would like to know is what is your treatment now that you have COVID?
So unfortunately, so I went downhill the day after Christmas, and on the shortness of breath was constant. Like I could be sitting and I would be like, I'm struggling to breathe. And the chest pain was
Mm.
really bad. So I ended up going to urgent care on the 27th, and they did a chest x-ray and an EKG, and everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. He said,
Oh,
unfortunately, this just happens for some people. They have this chest pain, shortness of breath. They have all of these symptoms. Nothing is showing up, but they're having all of these symptoms weeks up to months after having COVID. And
Yeah.
so at this point, it's just um, trying to treat the symptoms. So I take Tylenol and ibuprofen interchangeably every 4 hours to try to keep up with the pain
Yeah.
and take it
And this
easy.
is, yeah. And so you rest a lot, you interchangeably take painkillers.
Mhm.
And so tell me, what is different about when you were first ill with sepsis and pneumonia? What is different from being septic and pneumotic to having COVID? What is the big difference between those? Because people know septicemia, people know pneumonia.
Mhm.
COVID is very, very new. Are you able to say this is what's different between that and this?
So there's actually been quite a few similarities between this and the pneumonia, like a lot of similarities. I haven't been coughing up blood. That's one of the biggest differences.
Okay.
But that's for me personally, because I know some people actually do get to that point with COVID. But like honestly, there's been so many similarities for me personally between the two, but there's been more symptoms for me, like the headaches, the muscle pain and aching. Those are the two of the biggest differences for me, is having these daily headaches, which apparently are relatively common for COVID people having headaches. I
okay.
didn't know
So,
that actually.
so Karen, would you say that being septic and pneumonia is probably easier to endure than COVID?
In some ways, I honestly would say yes, because there's a treatment. There's a very specific, this is what we do to get you better. And so I was able to get better. It sucked. It
Yeah.
sucked and it was really hard, but there was a very clear treatment
There's a
plan.
treatment plan.
Whereas with this COVID, like the doctor that I saw at the urgent care, he said so many times, he's like, I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can do. He's
Yeah.
like,
Okay,
go
so can
ahead
I
and
ask
keep
a
up.
question?
Yeah.
At what point do you have to deal with be on a respirator?
So I'm not sure. Like at this point for me, I don't think that's something I'm gonna have to deal with. Um,
Okay.
I haven't gotten to the point of feeling like I can't breathe.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a big thing, because even though I've struggled to breathe, and I wake up sometimes and like have to take really big deep breaths because it's like I wasn't getting enough air, but I can always feel like I am getting enough air. It just is
Okay, now
difficult.
Kayleen,
Hmm.
can I just say you mentioned that you were having daily headaches.
Yes.
Um, can you find out if you can see a neurologist?
I think that is something, like, from what I've found so far, because what I want to do is I actually want to see my primary care doctor. I really want to go to him and say, this is what's going on. What do I do? Do I just keep hanging on and see
Yeah.
if it goes away, or what do I do? Because some people, as I've been researching, and I joined some like COVID support groups on Facebook. So something that I've been seeing a lot is people who are considered long haulers. They typically start considering you a long hauler if you've been sick for 30 days or more. And I'm at 23 days. So
Wow.
I'm not technically considered a long hauler yet. If I'm sick for another week, then I will be considered a long hauler. But so once you're considered like a long hauler,
Because we
it
don't want you
seems
to
like,
be a long hauler.
no, I don't want to be a long hauler. I really don't. But it seems like once you're considered a long hauler, they start doing some more testing, like neurology and more stuff that way, to see if there's other issues that have come up because of COVID that they
Because
can maybe
I
start
have
to help.
heard, I've heard, I try not to watch a lot of these shows because it's just there's no good news,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
I've heard that stroke is a possibility,
it
and so
is.
this is why I'm very concerned with you having headaches.
And Kayleen, if you
Mhm.
get to be the long hauler, that means that your care is free. Is that correct?
Well, I think, like, I need to double check. I think that my care is free now. Like, as far as I'm aware, with the insurance that I'm on, anything COVID related is covered,
Awesome.
Okay.
or should be
Wonderful.
covered. So
Wonderful.
so that's why I was okay going to urgent care. Like I started with Connect Care, so I did it over the phone. I
Nice.
started with that, and he's like, with your history of empyema, you just go to urgent care. Like he didn't even continue the call. He's like, go to urgent care. We're not gonna have this call. Like you just go.
Good.
But the reason I've been feeling comfortable getting the help is because I know that it should all be covered by my insurance. Um,
Wonderful.
And what kind
so
of treatment are you doing?
so right now I'm really just staying home, relaxing, like resting as much as possible, doing the Tylenol, ibuprofen. I have a heating pad that I put on my chest sometimes, because like my chest pain, like just being brutally honest, like I've been having chest pain this whole time we've been talking. Basically since I
Oh,
woke up this morning, I've had chest pain. And
oh,
Can
like,
I make one suggestion?
yeah.
Can you acetaminophen is better for you than ibuprofen, because when I was in the hospital after having my stroke,
Mhm.
they said um, that acids, which are ibuprofens,
Mhm.
increase your risk of stroke. So let's go to the other direction because we don't want to increase your risk of anything.
No. No, we don't. I
I
did.
think you've been through enough.
Yeah,
Kelly,
I want to just really quick, the headaches, something that I have kind of researched a little bit is if you're prone to headaches before having COVID, it kind of increases your likelihood of having headaches during COVID. And I have a history of
Okay.
migraines. And so it's not surprising, I guess, that I've been having the headaches with COVID because I have a history
Yeah.
with that.
But
Yes.
okay,
But
Kayleen, I want
don't
to
take
say,
it, don't take, I mean, I know you're not taking, you are taking all of this very seriously, but
yeah,
don't take it any of it lightly.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, because you are a migraine, now, do you have aura when you have migraines?
Not usually. Like, usually when I have migraines, it's the lights, sound, everything. It makes me want to throw up and I get
Oh,
very nauseous. So basically the only thing that helps me with migraine is like going to sleep in a very dark room.
yes.
Okay. So Kayleen, I want to say that you know, you've got a big smile on your face. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
You're positive. I know your body is crushed and aching. I can tell because you told us so. And I just want to say you're one positive lady. Like, I don't know how you do it, but praise the Lord that you
Mhm.
do it. I mean, you have a husband, you have two children, a
3.
6-year-old, a 19, 3, 6-year-old, 19-month-old, and 2.5.
3 and a
Okay.
3-year-old.
3-year-old. Okay,
Yes.
3-year-old, 19 months, and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
You have a husband. You do a blog from home. Um, you are one survivor and one perseverer, and you're very inspiring. Thank you for joining us on the
Thank
show and
you.
And thank
sharing
you
your
for jumping
story.
in because everybody in the world wants to talk to you, honey.
Yeah.
Thank
Everybody
you.
wants to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank
listen,
you.
thanks for being on our show. Thanks for sharing your
Yeah,
story.
thank
I'm
you
going to say a
very
little
much.
prayer for you, girl. And
Thank
you've
you.
got a beautiful smile. Keep smiling.
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Take care. Happy New Year.
you take care.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll see you next year.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.